The Seattle rain drummed against my office window as I signed the final papers. Harlan & Associates Property Management was expanding again, and my latest acquisition, a 52-unit apartment complex in Bellevue, would push my portfolio past the $200 million mark. Not bad for a kid from Tacoma who started with fixing plumbing in college dorms. I was Nathan Doyle, 47 years old, and I built my empire one property at a time. The $450,000 waterfront condo on Lake Washington was my first big purchase about 20 years ago when I was just starting out. My wife Valerie had called it pretentious back then, but she changed her tune when her wine club friends started visiting. The intercom buzzed. "Mr. Doyle, your son Kyle is here." I frowned. Kyle never visited my downtown office. At 23, he was supposed to be finishing his MBA at UW, though I suspected most of his time was spent at fraternity parties. He burst in without knocking, designer sneakers squeaking on my mahogany floor. "Dad, we need to talk about the condo." "Hello to you too, Kyle." He dropped into the leather chair across from my desk. "Look, I do not want to make this difficult, but Bryce and I need a place to live after graduation. The condo would be perfect." Bryce, my son's best friend from prep school. The kid whose father was a venture capitalist and who treated Kyle like his personal ATM when they went clubbing. "You mean the condo I've owned for 2 decades? The one that's part of my retirement portfolio?" Kyle's perfectly styled hair flopped forward as he leaned closer. "Come on, Dad. It's just sitting there. Mom says you barely use it anymore. Your mother does not dictate my business decisions." Actually, Kyle pulled out his phone, scrolling frantically. She's been talking to her lawyer friend, Patricia. Says there might be ways to transfer the property to me for tax purposes, family wealth preservation and all that. I sat back, studying my son. When had he become this entitled stranger? I remembered pushing him on swings at the park, teaching him to ride a bike. Now he wanted to lecture me about tax law while undermining my authority. The answer is no, Kyle. You want a place after graduation? Get a job. Earn it like I did. His face reddened. You were such a tough father. Mom says I do not care what your mother says. This discussion is over. Kyle stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the windows. I turned back to my desk, but something nagged at me. Patricia Davidson, Valerie's lawyer friend, had been coming up in conversation a lot lately. And there was something else. I pulled up my security feeds on the condo. We installed cameras after some vandalism last year, though they were mostly inactive. I spent the next week laying the groundwork. First, I had my lawyers quietly restructure the condo's ownership, placing it in an irrevocable trust that only I controlled. Every clause was ironclad. Every loophole closed. The property was untouchable. Second, I played my part perfectly. Valerie continued her secret meetings with Thomas, believing her deception was undetected. Kyle kept dropping hints about the condo, growing more aggressive each time. I let them think they were winning, all while preparing my counterattack. I had Greg dig deeper, finding more dirt on Thomas. His medical practice was shady, with multiple malpractice suits settled out of court. His financials were a mess, with debts hidden from his public image. I had leverage, and I was not afraid to use it. One evening, as Valerie was getting ready for another gallery event, I confronted her. "You re-seeing someone, or not you?" She paused, her eyes meeting mine in the mirror. "What are you talking about, Nathan?" "I know about Thomas. I know about the condo. I know about everything." Her face paled, but she tried to keep her composure. "You reimagining things, Nathan. There's nothing going on." "I have proof, Valerie. Photos, texts, surveillance footage. I know you've been planning this for months. Using Kyle, using the condo, using me." She turned to face me, her eyes filled with a mix of fear and defiance. "You see, not prove anything, Nathan. It's your word against mine. I do not need to prove anything. I already have. The condo is in a trust now. You see, not touch it. And as for Thomas, I have enough dirt on him to ruin his career. He would not be a problem anymore." She scoffed, trying to hide her panic. "You re-bluffing. You would not do that to me." "I would not? You've been planning to leave me to take half of what I've built, and you think I would not fight back? You underestimated me, Valerie. You both did." She stormed out, slamming the door behind her. I knew she'd go straight to Thomas, and I was ready for that too. I had Greg tailing him, ready to document every move. This was my game now, and I was playing to win. The next day, I called Kyle into my office. He sauntered in, thinking he had the upper hand. "Dad, I've been thinking. I know what you've been thinking, Kyle. And it stops now. The condo is off the table. You want a place to live? Get a job, like I told you before." He sneered. "You see, not do this, Dad. Mom says I do not care what your mother says. This is my decision and it's final. You want to be an adult? Start acting like one. Earn your keep like I did. He stormed out just like his mother. But I knew I had them both on the ropes. It was only a matter of time before they realized they'd lost. And I was ready to enjoy the victory. I did say that, I replied, my voice steady and calm. But before we discuss that, there's something else we need to address. Kyle's smile faltered slightly, but he tried to hide it. What do you mean, Dad? I mean, there's been some unusual activity lately. Things that do not add up. Like your mother's frequent visits to the condo. Or the way you and Bryce have been whispering in corners, planning something behind my back. Valerie, who had just re-entered the room, froze mid-step. Her eyes widened in realization, but she tried to play it off. Nathan, what are you talking about? I know what you were just doing, Valerie. And I know about Thomas. I know about the condo. I know about everything. The room was silent, the weight of my words hanging heavy in the air. Kyle's face turned red, a mix of anger and embarrassment. Bryce, standing behind him, looked like he wanted to disappear. Dad, you being ridiculous, Kyle stammered. There's no, I have proof, Kyle. Photos, texts, surveillance footage. I know you've been planning this for months. Using the condo, using me, using your mother's affair to get what you want. Valerie's face paled, but she tried to keep her composure. Nathan, you overreacting. There's no need to air our dirty laundry in front of everyone. I'm not overreacting, Valerie. And this is not just about us. This is about trust, about honesty, about the people we've become. You both thought you could scheme behind my back, use me for your own gain. But you were wrong. I turned to the guests who were watching the scene unfold with a mix of shock and fascination. I'm sorry for the disruption, everyone. But sometimes the truth needs to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it is. I turned back to Valerie and Kyle, my voice firm and unyielding. The condo is off the table. Permanently. And as for you, Valerie, I think it's time we take a break from each other. You can stay at the condo since you seem to like it so much. And Kyle, you can find your own place. I suggest you start looking for a job too. It's time you both start taking responsibility for your actions. With that, I walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. I knew I had made the right decision. It was time to take control of my life, to stand up for myself, and to show them that I would not be played for a fool any longer. The room erupted into chaos. Guests screamed and scrambled out of the way as Bryce lunged at me again, his eyes wild with rage. I ducked just in time, the bottle missing my head by inches and shattering against the wall behind me. I could feel the warm blood trickling down my face, but the adrenaline kept me focused. Kyle, for a moment, looked horrified by Bryce's actions, but then his expression hardened. You deserve it, Dad. You've been a monster to us. I steadied myself, my vision blurring slightly from the blow. A monster? For standing up for myself? For exposing your mother's affair and your betrayal? Bryce charged again, but this time I was ready. I sidestepped his attack and grabbed his arm, twisting it behind his back. He yelped in pain, dropping the broken neck of the champagne bottle. I pushed him away, and he stumbled, falling to the floor. Enough, I growled, turning to Kyle. This ends now. You and your mother have made your choices, and now you have to live with the consequences. Valerie, who had been standing frozen in shock, finally found her voice. Nathan, please. Let us talk about this. We can work something out. I looked at her, my expression cold. There's nothing to talk about, Valerie. You've made your bed, and now you have to lie in it. Just like Kyle and Bryce. I turned to the guests who were watching the scene with a mix of horror and fascination. I'm sorry for the disruption, everyone. But sometimes the truth needs to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it is. I walked out of the room, leaving behind a stunned silence. As I made my way to the exit, I could hear the murmurs of the guests, the whispers of shock and disbelief. But I did not care. I had done what I needed to do. I had exposed the truth, and now I could move forward. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, the pain in my head a stark reminder of the night's events. But I knew I had made the right decision. It was time to take control of my life, to stand up for myself, and to show them that I would not be played for a fool any longer. I pulled out my phone and dialed Greg. It's done. I need you to handle the rest. Make sure they see not touch me or my property. And find out where Thomas Prescott is. I have a few words for him too. I let her rant, her words echoing through the ballroom. The guests watched in stunned silence, the drama unfolding before them like a twisted play. I could see the satisfaction in their eyes, the schadenfreude of witnessing someone else's misery. You've been manipulating us, Nathan, Valerie screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. You think you can just throw us away like we nothing. I waited for her to finish, my expression calm and composed. When she finally ran out of steam, I spoke, my voice steady and firm. I never manipulated you, Valerie. I gave you everything. A comfortable life, a beautiful home, a son who adores you. And this is how you repay me. By betraying me, by plotting behind my back, by using our son to steal from me. She scoffed, her eyes wild with anger. You delusional, Nathan. You think you own us? You think you can control our lives? I never tried to control your lives, Valerie. I only asked for loyalty, for honesty, for respect. But you threw that all away. You chose to deceive me, to conspire against me, to destroy our family. I turned to Kyle, who was standing silently beside his mother, his face pale and drawn. And you, Kyle? You were supposed to be my son, my heir. But you chose to side with her, to betray me, to steal from me. You were no better than a common thief. Kyle's eyes flashed with anger, but he said nothing. He knew he was cornered, that there was no way out of this mess. I turned back to Valerie, my voice cold and unyielding. You wanted a divorce, Valerie. You wanted to take half of what I've built, to destroy me. But you underestimated me. You thought you could play me for a fool, but you were wrong. I nodded to the officers who stepped forward, handcuffs at the ready. Take them away. Charge them with everything you can. Assault, theft, conspiracy, whatever applies. Valerie's eyes widened in shock. Nathan, you not do this. You not just throw us away like this. I'm not throwing you away, Valerie. You did that to yourselves. I'm just cleaning up the mess you made. As the officers led them away, Valerie screamed and struggled, but it was no use. She was caught, and she knew it. I watched them go, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. It was over. The betrayal, the deception, the lies. It was all over. I turned to the guests who were watching me with a mix of awe and fear. I'm sorry for the disruption, everyone. But sometimes the truth needs to be told, no matter how uncomfortable it is. I walked out of the room, leaving behind the chaos and the whispers. As I stepped out into the cool night air, I took a deep breath, the pain in my head a stark reminder of the night's events. But I knew I had made the right decision. It was time to take control of my life, to stand up for myself, and to show them that I would not be played for a fool any longer. I pulled out my phone and dialed Greg. It's done. I need you to handle the rest. Make sure they not touch me or my property. And find out where Thomas Prescott is. I have a few words for him too. I left the station, the cool night air a stark contrast to the heated emotions of the evening. My head throbbed, but the pain was a reminder of the battle I had fought and won. I knew this was just the beginning. The real revenge was about to unfold. I drove to my office, the city lights blurring into a stream of colors as I navigated the familiar streets. Once inside, I pulled up the security feeds from the condo. Thomas Prescott was still there, pacing nervously in the Windsor suite. I watched him for a moment, a sense of satisfaction washing over me. He had no idea what was coming. I called Greg again. I need you to handle Thomas Prescott. Make sure he not leave the condo. And get me everything you can on his illegal activities. Medical records, financial transactions, anything that can incriminate him. On it, boss. But you should know Valerie's been trying to reach you. She's desperate, leaving messages, begging for a chance to talk. I do not want to hear from her. Block her calls, block her emails. She's dead to me. I hung up and turned my attention back to the security feed. Thomas was on the phone, his voice muffled but his frustration clear. He was trying to call Valerie, but she was not answering. I smiled, knowing that she was probably in a cell, realizing the full extent of her mistakes. I spent the rest of the night in my office, going over the details of my plan. I had to make sure everything was in place, that there were no loopholes, no weaknesses. I had to be ruthless, unforgiving. This was war, and I was determined to win. As the first light of dawn broke over the city, I finally allowed myself a moment of rest. I leaned back in my chair, closing my eyes, but sleep eluded me. My mind was racing, replaying the events of the night, the betrayal, the confrontation, the victory. I knew I had made the right decision. It was time to take control of my life, to stand up for myself, and to show them that I would not be played for a fool any longer. I stood up, my resolve strengthening with each passing moment. I was Nathan Doyle, and I would not be defeated. I would fight, I would win, and I would make sure that justice was served. I walked out of my office, ready to face whatever came next. The battle was far from over, but I was prepared. I was ready, and I would not back down. Thomas looked up, his eyes filled with a mix of fear and resignation. Kyle was just a pawn. Valerie manipulated him, played on his sense of entitlement. She knew he wanted the condo, and she used that to her advantage. She told him it was his birthright, that you were being unfair by keeping it from him. I nodded, my expression cold. And Bryce? What was his role in all this? Thomas sighed, running a hand through his disheveled hair. Bryce was just a friend, someone Kyle trusted. Valerie used him to keep an eye on Kyle to make sure he stayed on track with the plan. She knew Bryce would do anything for Kyle, and she exploited that. I leaned back in my chair, considering his words. And what about you? What did you get out of all this? Thomas met my gaze, his eyes filled with a mix of shame and defiance. I loved her, or at least I thought I did. She was charming, seductive, and she promised me a life I could not resist. A life of luxury, of wealth, of power. I was a fool, blinded by her promises and my own desires. I smiled coldly. And now? What do you think of her now? Thomas looked down at his hands, his voice barely a whisper. I see her for what she is. A manipulator, a liar, a woman who will stop at nothing to get what she wants. I was a pawn in her game, just like Kyle and Bryce. I stood up, my chair scraping loudly against the floor. You were right, Thomas. You were all pawns in her game. And now it's time for you to pay the price. I walked over to the door and opened it, gesturing for him to leave. You have 24 hours to gather all the evidence you have on Valerie's schemes. Every email, every text, every piece of correspondence. Bring it to my office and we'll discuss your future. Thomas stood up, his face pale but determined. And if I do not? I smiled, my voice cold and unyielding. Then these recordings go public. Your career, your freedom, your life all finished. And do not think about running. I have eyes and ears everywhere. You see, not hide from me. Thomas nodded, his shoulders slumped in defeat. I understand. I'll have everything for you by tomorrow. As he walked out of the room, I felt a sense of satisfaction wash over me. The first phase of my revenge was complete. Now it was time for the next step. I pulled out my phone and dialed Greg. It's done. Thomas is cooperating. Make sure he does not try anything stupid. And get me everything you can on Valerie's financials. I want to know every account, every transaction, every secret she's been hiding. On it, boss. But you should know Valerie's been trying to reach you again. She's desperate, leaving messages, begging for a chance to talk. I do not want to hear from her. Block her calls, block her emails. She's dead to me. I hung up and turned my attention back to the room, the echoes of Thomas's confession still lingering in the air. I knew this was just the beginning. The real revenge was about to unfold. I was Nathan Doyle and I would not be defeated. I would fight, I would win, and I would make sure that justice was served. I did not wait long to begin. I called Kyle that same afternoon, instructing him to meet me at my office after his classes. He sounded hesitant, subdued, an echo of his former confidence. When he arrived, I saw the lines of exhaustion on his face, the confusion of a young man who found the ground shifting under his feet. Sit down, Kyle, I said, my tone firm. He obeyed without protest, a rare moment in our father-son dynamic. I did not sugarcoat things. You need to understand what's happening. Your mother and I are divorcing. All the evidence is in the hands of the court. The assets you counted on are off the table. He stared at his hands, shoulders trembling. So, what happens to us? You make your own way, just like I did. The trust funds are locked for the future, but you get nothing for now. You need to find a job, finish your degree, pay rent if you want to live somewhere decent. In other words, you grow up. A flicker of anger crossed his face, but it faded quickly to fear and uncertainty. You recutting me off? I am setting you free, Kyle. I gave you every advantage, but I see not give you character. That you'll have to earn yourself. He was silent, tears shining in his eyes, and I almost softened. But I remembered Greg's words, Daniel's warnings, and the years of manipulation. Sometimes the kindest thing a parent can do is let their children learn hard lessons. Your mother. He started, his voice cracking. She said you never loved us. She lied, Kyle. I worked for you, gave up more than you'll ever understand. But love does not mean endless forgiveness. It means honesty, standards, boundaries. I hope someday you see that. He left in silence, the weight of reality stark on his shoulders. I watched from my window, the clouds parting over St. Louis, the city that had taught me the value of hard work and survival. The world was open for Kyle, just as it had once been for me. It was up to him to seize it. Phase 2 complete. Now, I set my sights on rebuilding, not just my fortune, but my sense of peace. I knew there would be whispers and media speculation, maybe even regret for what might have been. But in the end, I chose truth over deception, strength over surrender. And that, I realized as I finally closed my eyes that night, was the greatest gift I could give myself. Her friends would distance themselves in droves, the lush lunch invitations and gallery openings would dry up overnight. The phone kept lighting up with more frantic calls, Valerie's number, Kyle's, even Bryce once, all of them grasping for the lifeline they'd taken for granted. I silenced each one. The only replies that mattered now came from lawyers and business partners, and every response from my team signaled that the tide was firmly turning in my favor. By early evening, news crews were already circling my street, but my security kept them at bay. Occasionally, I caught glimpses of neighbors peering curiously through windows, but I did not care. Let them gossip. Let them watch the cracks in the Doyle family's golden reputation spread across headlines. Daniel called to confirm the press release had landed as intended, calm, factual, and damning in all the right ways. Our narrative was everywhere: a betrayed husband protecting his legacy, exposing fraud, cleaning house. Sympathy, at least in public, was on my side. Yet as I locked up for the night and stepped outside into the cool air, the brief satisfaction of victory gave way to a surprising stillness. The house was quiet, too quiet, and for the first time in weeks, I could hear the hum of the city unobstructed by chaos at home. The empire I'd spent my life building was intact. Stronger, maybe, for what I'd survived. But as the city lights blinked on across the water and the sky darkened to midnight blue, I finally allowed myself a real breath. I'd lost a wife of 25 years, and my son's trust might never be earned back. Yet in that moment I understood I'd never been more free. Everything they had tried to steal, everything they'd tried to shatter, had only made me sharper, more certain of where I stood. For the first time in a long while, I was on my own terms. The story's headlines might echo through Seattle high society for months, but their opinion no longer mattered. I sipped my bourbon, watching the rain start again beyond my window, and looked forward to what came next. Not revenge, not pettiness, but rebuilding, this time with no illusions clouding the future. I did not bother responding to Valerie. There was nothing more to say to her, not after years of lies, manipulation, and betrayal. The distance between us now felt like air after choking on smoke for too long. I owed her nothing, not explanations, not comfort, not even anger. Instead, I closed my laptop and stepped out onto the condo's balcony, letting the cool air mingle with the scent of rain. From here, the twinkling city lights seemed almost peaceful, a stark contrast to the storm that had consumed my personal life. Behind me, laughter and conversation still echoed through the rooms. Business partners, investors, and friends toasted to my resilience, or perhaps simply their own luck at not being caught in a similar trap. In the distance, I could almost see my reflection in the glass, older, yes, with a visible scar now, but sharper too. I'd survived deceit and assault, the public unraveling of a marriage, the loss of illusions I'd carried since I was a poor kid in St. Louis. I had fought back in the only way I knew, with precision, with purpose, and with an unyielding refusal to be anyone's victim. The world would keep spinning. Seattle's movers and shakers would choose new scandals by next season. Kyle and Valerie would be forced to face the world they'd shaped by their own hands, devoid of the comforts they'd tried to steal from me. As for Thomas, his medical license and his freedom would soon be distant memories. Satisfied? I was closer than I'd been in years. But I knew that satisfaction, real satisfaction, would not come from revenge alone. It would come from rebuilding myself, my life, maybe even the relationships that could be salvaged in time. For now, with the storm finally broken and the city washed clean by another night of rain, I allowed myself a genuine, if fleeting, sense of peace. Let them call me ruthless, cold, unforgiving. I had protected what was mine and protected myself. And as I raised my glass to the city, I silently promised myself never again would I mistake weakness for kindness or generosity for naivety. The next chapter was mine to write, and I planned for it to be extraordinary. The years since have been remarkably clear. My name, Nathan Doyle, quietly returned to prominence in Seattle's business world. Deals closed, properties acquired, and friends new and old invited for evenings at my Lake Washington condo. People talk as they always do, but now they speak of respect, sometimes with a hint of caution, always with acknowledgement that I am not a man to cross. Kyle rose slowly but steadily. He passed my challenge, working his way into an entry-level position at a reputable real estate firm, not through my hand, but his own perseverance. When the 6 months ended and he brought back my check uncashed, he did so with a simple honesty I had not seen in him before. I finally get it, Dad. I am ready to earn it, not inherit it. I let him keep the check then as seed money for his own path. We had dinner for the first time in over a year. There were no apologies for the past, just a quiet understanding between father and son that trust, once lost, can return if you work for it. Valerie faded from the spotlight, living quietly on the annuity I arranged. She never called, never wrote, never tried to find her way back into the world she'd schemed to keep. Some wounds close, but they never truly heal. I wished her peace in the silence, sometimes that's as close to forgiveness as anyone can give. Thomas Prescott remained a cautionary tale among Seattle's elite, his name a whispered warning at charity galas and medical conferences. His downfall rippled through the city, a testament to what happens when greed rules over integrity. Each season's rain that drums on the windows of my condo reminds me of everything I lost and everything I gained. I teach what I know: responsibility, honesty, and the courage to face hard truths even when it costs you dearly. That's my legacy now, and I guard it fiercely. There's no fairy tale ending, only real life. Mine is marked by resolve, the echoes of justice, and the steady certainty that what you build brick by brick, deed by deed, remains long after the storm has passed. This, I believe, is what true power means: the strength to endure, to teach, and to begin again as many times as necessary. And so, life goes on. The city, the rain, the quiet clink of a glass in the dark, all reminders that some prices are worth paying and some lessons must be learned the hard way. For me, that's enough. He stood in the doorway, rainwater dripping from his jacket, the once proud tilt of his chin replaced by the wary humility Nathan had hoped to see. Dad, if you meant what you wrote about earning it, well, I want to try. No shortcuts. No trust fund. Let me prove it. And Nathan had, begrudgingly at first, let him. Kyle started at the bottom: temporary projects, late-night calls with maintenance crews, sitting respectfully through meetings where Nathan expected him only to listen. Some old wounds bled anew as father and son navigated the narrow path between past betrayal and wary hope. But Kyle put his head down, backed up every promise with quiet effort and a stubborn refusal to repeat old mistakes. Years blurred by in project milestones, condos, towers, revitalized neighborhoods, until, finally, even the most skeptical Doyle board member conceded that the ungrateful son was, at last, a builder in name and in spirit. Nathan's conditions never changed: responsibility, transparency, and the grit to stand alone when necessary. Kyle surpassed all expectations. Earning, not inheriting, each rung of authority, he brought a new energy to Doyle Properties and even taught Nathan that the hardest kind of forgiveness is the one you grant yourself through others' second chances. The wedding invitation rested on the corner of Nathan's desk, embossed, elegant, understated. Melissa Wong was Kyle's equal and, in many ways, his anchor. Smart, hardworking, with her own family's legacy of integrity in Seattle business circles. Nathan had met her parents weeks ago at dinner, laughter and gentle questions forging cautious ties between families who'd seen their share of misfortune and triumph. Nathan raised his coffee cup to the morning haze. The city below glittered with possibility, the pain endured a decade ago having transformed into a wealth of wisdom rather than bitterness. There was no peace with the past, not entirely, but a kind of acceptance. The Doyle name meant something again, not just power, but resilience and earned respect. He glanced once more at the reports, then closed the file. His work was not finished, but his greatest lesson had been taught and finally received. Kyle's future was his own, to build, to cherish, or to lose. Nathan trusted him with it. Taking the last sip of coffee, Nathan stepped back inside, ready to meet the day and whatever new challenge awaited, certain now that he would never again mistake kindness for weakness nor allow betrayal to pass for love. The city's skyline, his legacy, and Kyle's awaited the sunrise. Nathan let the silence stretch, considering his son's words and the old name echoing in the room. For years, Bryce had been a symbol of the old wounds of betrayal, anger, and consequences delivered swiftly and, perhaps, beyond what was deserved for youthful arrogance. But now time had softened the edges. Even old rivals could find their dignity in regret. He saw her cleaning? Nathan finally asked, voice calm but with a touch of something mournful beneath. Kyle nodded. He did not know what to say. He just watched. Later, he told me seeing her like that made him rethink a lot. About loyalty, about how quickly fortunes change. He asked if I'd forgiven him. And have you? Nathan asked. Kyle's lips pressed into a thin line, then he drew a deep breath. I do not know if forgiveness is the right word. I do not forget what he did, but I do not hate him. He was young and scared, like I was. I told him the truth, that we all paid for our mistakes. And I told him if he wanted to do better, he still could. Nathan studied Kyle, pride and an odd pang of sorrow mixing in his chest. Where shame and anger had once crowded their family, now there was something grittier, real understanding, humility, maybe even the start of redemption. People change, Kyle, Nathan said quietly. Sometimes because they suffer. Sometimes because someone gives them a second chance. I know, Dad, Kyle replied. You gave that to me. I'll never forget it. Or waste it. There was nothing more to say, a rare moment and a precious one. Nathan reached across the desk to shake his son's hand, only for Kyle to step forward and embrace him, solid and real, father to son, student to teacher, builder to builder. The city stretched before them through the glass, shimmering with possibility in the pale light. Legacies built in hard-won lessons, not easy inheritance. And at the center of it all, a family rebuilt by choice, by sweat, and by the courage to hold tight to the truth no matter what it cost. Nathan heard the distant sound of rain beginning again, and he savored it. Some storms, he finally understood, do not just clear the air, they reveal what's worth sheltering and what's worth building anew. Thomas Prescott was a recovering addict, helping others avoid the mistakes he'd made. Kyle had risen to vice president, engaged to a woman who loved him for who he was, not what he could give her. Valerie was starting over, building a small business with honest labor. And Nathan? He stood at the pinnacle of his empire, stronger, wiser, and more resilient than ever. The city lights flickered on as the sun dipped below the horizon, casting a warm glow over the water. Nathan raised his glass, the crystal catching the last rays of daylight. To redemption, he thought. To second chances. To the power of transformation. He took a sip, the champagne cool and crisp on his tongue. The past was a shadow, but it no longer defined him. He had faced betrayal, loss, and the harshest of truths. And he had emerged victorious, not just in wealth, but in character. The phone buzzed again, another text from Greg. Bryce had donated $10,000 to a local homeless shelter in Nathan's name. A small gesture, but a significant one. Nathan smiled, a rare, genuine smile that softened the lines around his eyes. Forgiveness, he realized, was not about forgetting. It was about moving forward, about choosing to let go of the past and embrace the future. He stepped out onto the balcony, the cool evening air a stark contrast to the warmth of the condo. The city stretched out before him, a tapestry of lights and shadows, of triumph and tragedy. And in that moment he knew he had built more than an empire. He had built a legacy of strength, of resilience, of unyielding determination. The champagne still stung when it spilled, but only if you were the one holding the bottle. And Nathan Doyle was no longer the one holding the bottle. He was the one who had learned to dance in the rain, to find beauty in the storm, and to rise above the ashes of betrayal. As the night deepened, he stood there, a silent sentinel watching over the city he had shaped and the family he had rebuilt. The past was a shadow, but the future was a promise. And Nathan Doyle was ready to embrace it, one step at a time. Thomas sold pills legally but lived in shame. Bryce taught ethics to students who probably laughed behind his back. And Kyle had become what Nathan always hoped but never dared expect. A worthy successor who understood power without forgetting its price. His phone rang again. This time it was Kyle. "Dad, I know you're at the condo. Thought you might want to talk." "Come over," Nathan said. "Bring Melissa." They arrived an hour later, finding Nathan on the balcony. The skyline glittered with lights from buildings he'd financed or developed, an empire built on ambition, defended by ruthlessness, and now passing to someone who'd learned its true cost. "Beautiful view," Melissa said softly, understanding in her eyes. She knew the story by now. "It is," Nathan agreed. He poured them each a glass of champagne. A toast to family. Not the one we reborn with, but the one we become. Kyle raised his glass, emotion flickering in his eyes. "To lessons learned." Melissa added quietly, "to second chances earned." They clinked glasses, the crystal ringing like a bell. Nathan sipped and tasted victory, not the bitter satisfaction of revenge, but the complex flavor of justice served and debts paid. The champagne sparkled in the city lights, beautiful and dangerous like power itself. Later, after Kyle and Melissa had left, Nathan stood alone on the balcony. His phone buzzed with another report, confirmed Valerie's cleaning business filing successful. Name, Second Chances Janitorial Services. 3 employees, including herself. First contract, SeaTac Terminal C, her current employer. He smiled into the darkness. Life went on. Wheels turned. And sometimes, just sometimes, people learned. The city lights reflected off the water like scattered diamonds. In the distance, a cargo ship's horn sounded, the same sound that had punctuated that night 10 years ago when his old life ended. Nathan Doyle, real estate emperor, father, and dealer of justice, finished his champagne and went inside. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new victories, new lessons to be taught. The game never ended. You just learned to play it better. And as for forgiveness, he'd learned something Thomas was right about. The harshest mercy sometimes came in the form of enforced humility, not forgiveness. His enemies had not been destroyed. They had been remade. And sometimes that was the greatest revenge of all.